Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. And now, here's Chris McCann.
Good evening and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Genesis. Tonight is study number 26 in Genesis chapter 35, and we're going to begin reading from verse 22. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun, the sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padan Aram. Well, here in verse 22, we're told that it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land, and that is beyond the Tower of Eder. We talked about that in our last study, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Now, Bilhah was a handmaid that was given to Jacob to wife by Rachel when Rachel could not, for a time, have children, or she wasn't bearing children. And so her sister was having son after son, child after child. And Rachel determined, well, I'll compete with my sister by giving my husband Jacob my handmaid Bilhah, and I'll have children through her. And that's why we read that Bilhah is his father's concubine. But we should not think that means that she's not a wife. She is a wife. A concubine was a wife. It was not a woman in that situation was not considered on par or equal to a mistress like Sarah, or in this case like Leah and Rachel. But still, it was a wife, and God viewed them as wives. Well, Reuben, who was son of Leah, the firstborn son of Leah, and also the firstborn son of Jacob overall. He's the first son that Jacob had, and probably because we know that Jacob was 60 when he went to Haran, and then he worked 7 years from that point, and was given Leah to wife, and he went into her, that we can expect that 9 months later, or not too long after that, Reuben would have been born. So Reuben was probably born, because we can calculate this according to the biblical calendar of history. Jacob entered Haran age 60 in 1947 BC, or excuse me, yeah, that's right, 1947 BC, worked 7 years until 1940 BC, and remember, it's the Old Testament side, so you count down as the years increase. So he finished the 7-year contract in 1940 BC, was given Leah to wife, realized the deception after already having the marriage night, and then he worked 7 additional years for Rachel, but he was given Rachel at the beginning of that period. Still, in all likelihood, Reuben's conceived and born the next year, 1939 BC, but it's not definite. It's circumstantial evidence, I think good circumstantial evidence. And now his father Jacob is over 100 years old. So if Reuben's born in 1939 BC, it means that Jacob was 68 years old at the time of his birth, and Reuben is in his 30s. In his 30s at this point, and he lays with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and significantly, we're told, and Israel heard it. And that's the only statement that's made at this point. Israel, who is Jacob, his father, heard this evil report that his firstborn son, Reuben, had sexual relations with his concubine, Bilhah. He lay with her. And then it says, though, well, nothing happened, apparently. And then we're told a list is given of the 12 sons, and the account continues. And maybe it was no big deal. Maybe it wasn't all that important, or maybe it didn't trouble Jacob all that much. No, we shouldn't think that. We shouldn't think that. Actually, it did trouble Jacob, and actually it troubled Reuben, or would be a troubling thing to Reuben more than he could ever know. Now, it's also, I think, significant that Bilhah, her name, is Strong's number 1090, comes from a related word, Strong's number 1089, that is translated as trouble in one place. And that's in Ezra 4, in verse 4, where we read, Ezra 4, verse 4, then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building. The word troubled is this word that is related to Bilhah. Her name means trouble. And she certainly would bring that into the life of Reuben, because Jacob did not forget. He heard it and he kept it in mind, and God brought it to his mind. If we go to Genesis 49, when Jacob is near death, and we know that the age of Jacob's death, he's 147. He entered into Egypt when he was 130, and he lived 17 years in Egypt. And now it's coming to the point of his death, and we can figure that he's a very frail man at this point, being so old. And he's going to call his sons and give them the blessing, or give them a benediction to each one. And some of it is certainly not a blessing. And it's also God moving Jacob to say these things for the Lord's own spiritual purposes. But in this time, this would be the year 1860 BC, some 40 years since the incident that we're reading of in Genesis 35, about 40 years later. And it says in Genesis 49, I'll start in verse 1. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, thou defilest thou it, he went up to my couch. So we do see that it was not forgotten. Jacob has remembered the incident long ago concerning his firstborn son Reuben, who is said to be the beginning of his strength, the excellency of dignity, the excellency of power, but then unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel. Now, we wonder, well, what does that mean? And that Reuben's unstable as water and will not excel. And I don't want to go too deeply into Genesis 49 because, Lord willing, someday we'll get there. We're approaching that as we're in chapter 35 right now. But we can see that the word unstable is the same word. It has the same consonants. Unstable is only found here. It's Strong 6349. It's, again, the same word that has the same consonants as Strong 6348, which is translated as light. Light, not in the sense of shining like a light, but in the sense of something negative. It's the word that's found in Judges chapter 9, Judges 9 verse 4. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal Berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons, which followed him. And that's the word light. And also in Zephaniah chapter 3, it's again translated as light. Zephaniah 3, verse 3, her princes within her are roaring lions, her judges are evening wolves. They gnaw not the bones till the morrow. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law. Light and treacherous, or light and vain. It's not a good description at all. It's indicating someone we maybe could say is shallow, empty. They're certainly not filled with the Spirit of God. They are ungodly, that's clear, though they have relationship with God. Her prophets are light and treacherous, so they're prophesying. But obviously they're prophesying falsely. And so unstable as water, or light as water, Jacob is saying of Reuben, thou shalt not excel. Now the word excel is Strong's number 3498, and this word is often translated remain or left. For example, if we go to Isaiah chapter 1, in verses 8 and 9, it's used a couple of times. Isaiah 1, verse 8, and the daughter of Zion is left, and this is the word, Strong's 3498. The daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, and as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Except Jehovah of hosts had left, and that's the word again, left unto us a very small remnant. We should have been in Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. So to be left as a remnant. And it's also the word in Zechariah 13, verse 8. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 8, and it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith Jehovah, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And then it goes on to say, God will bring the third part through the fire and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. And he sums it up by saying, it is my people. So clearly, those that are left, the third part, the remnant, are the people of God. But this verse is saying, again, Reuben is unstable as water. He's light as water. And thou, or you, Reuben, will not be left. You'll not be left. And that is put in that way, in the negative way, in Psalm 106, using that same word. Psalm 106, verse 11, concerning the Egyptians who perished in the Red Sea. and the waters covered their enemies, there was not one of them left. Not one excelled. They were slain, and that's why it's a very grievous thing that God is saying concerning Reuben. Now, we'll go to 1 Chronicles 5, but we're not going to have time to get into it at this point. 1 Chronicles 5, and the first 2 verses, we read there, "Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but for as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, and the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. For Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler, but the birthright was Joseph's." All right, so now God is making it clear that Reuben lost the right of the firstborn son, the birthright, and the reason is he defiled his father's bed. And as a result, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph. That would be Ephraim and Manasseh. And the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. It's sort of history repeating itself, isn't it? Jacob was the beneficiary of the blessing and the birthright of the firstborn, not going to the firstborn, but going to him because of his mother, who, arranged the circumstances of the deception when she dressed him in his brother Esau's clothes and put the hairy skin on his arms and the back of his neck and then had him go in to Isaac and pretend that he was his brother Esau, and Isaac blessed Jacob thinking it was Esau, but in actuality it was Jacob who received the blessing. And now this has happened in Jacob's own family, that his firstborn son has done a horrible thing, and when we get together our next study, we'll see just how horrible it was according to the law of God. And as a result, his firstborn son cannot receive the blessing of the birthright of the firstborn, but another son receives it. And again, God is teaching spiritual truth that we'll have to look at when we get together in our next Bible study.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.